need to just mention a little bit tonight. So, okay, if there's no other news from Peter, we're well and started.
I remember
right,
Avebury going there with you.
Well, and I think you went there with. Didn't you go there with? Oh God, Hugh, as well. Didn't you?
Yes, yeah, probably yes, yep.
Yeah, I heard stuff about that trip that, but we won't go there. But is that the trip? Is that the trip with Hugh that you all had to wait while somebody had a meal in a pub?
Yes, I believe it was. Yes.
Peter, that's on my standard. That's absolutely terrible. I wouldn't let you wait whilst I'm eating. And, okay, Pete. Anyway, really nice on behalf of everybody else to see you back. I have actually tried to get hold of Sandra, but I've now decided, as of today, I went to the post office today and I sent her a postcard to
Okay.
because I can't get hold of her, Pete. So
No.
yeah. So okay then. Thank you for that, Pete. Good to see you back, and good on behalf of everybody. And next, Drina, anything else you'd like to tell us today?
It's more a health thing. I was watching a video about a nutritional person, and he was saying the hunter-gatherers never retired. And I hadn't thought of that, but he was pointing out that we shouldn't think of retirement as a time to sit round. We should just continue doing what we do.
And do you know what, right, that, Adrina, you do say lots of sensible things, and I just blow you a kiss for that, because I know some of you are going to disagree with this, but my granddad refused to retire. He was still driving lorries in his 70s. He retired at 93. And wow. What I'm going to say it, but what killed off my granddad Noah was that when he retired at 93, 6 months later, I'm going to say, be as cruel as it is, he dropped dead, because he just is, apparently the doctor told us, because his body was used to working all his life, his body could not get used to him sitting down, and that's what killed my granddad. So and what you've just said, I know some people have got hard jobs, and they feel that they need to retire at 60, 65 and so on. But I can remember Sandra telling me that she was so angry with her husband that when her husband died, they had so many plans. 6 months later, after her husband retired, he died, and she was so angry. And if he'd carried on working, then things would have been different. And what you've just said about that hunter-gatherer thing, it's a message from the past. If people want to carry on working, they should have every opportunity to do so. And Peter is an example of that, because I think Peter worked into his 70s as well.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Drina. I like that. I like that. Some might disagree. That's fine. Right, David, anything you'd like to say, lovely?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Oh, and also we've got Owen saying he can't get on again. So, right, we had this last week, didn't we? Owen's online, so I don't know what to say. Owen, keep watching on YouTube, and I will. Well, I have to phone. I'll have to phone Owen. I'm going to phone you tomorrow, and we're going to try and work out this Zoom link. Okay. But Dell is online, and he's saying he retired out at 55 out of choice. So anyway, thanks for that, Dell. Right, Adam's retiring. Adam's just retired.
Just ask me. Nothing to offer.
Okay then. Talking about things to offer, Anne's always got something to offer. She's young, free, and single. Go on, Anne.
And yes, I found something this week. I very rarely find anything. But for the past 3 years, I've been studying nutrition fairly. And then I found this chap called Bill Chindler, who is an archaeologist, anthropologist, and chef. And he spent his life looking at how food has been affected by, and he feels we are not natural omnivores, but we've been made so by technology. And it's the technology that started with the making of stone tools that could cut stuff and could help us to manage our and he then looked at he said he's been his whole life doing at it. And I've jotted down a bit. 5 to 7 million years ago, we were foragers with no technology, but we ate a lot of plants and insects. 3.5 million years ago, we were gatherers, and we found we had fat and organs and most of the intestines, but we left the carcass to other people because we couldn't manage meat at that stage. And
so
then
we could digest the meat. That's what you're saying. We're not up to digesting meat.
At that stage, we weren't. We couldn't.
Okay.
We couldn't have it because it was all raw. And anyway, then 2 million years ago, we started hunting, and we at that stage probably had access to fire. At that point, we became top predators, and then we could choose everything we liked off the carcass because we could cook it. And at that time, he believes that's when our brains started getting even bigger. And then 10 to 15,000 years ago, we got the agricultural revolution. And at that point, we stopped eating a very wide variety of plants, which were then supplemented by the grains and stuff we were having from growing from the agricultural revolution, which meant we lost a lot. It's a great loss to our digestive system. In the 1770s, we became consumers. So we became away from doing things and growing things and other people did it for us. And we were all involved in the food system before that time, but at that time we didn't. And then he said, no other animal in the world asked what they should eat, only us.
And can I just say, I don't know if you've just finished, but if you haven't, then carry on after me.
Sorry?
But I don't know if you've just finished with what you've just said, but I think it'd be appropriate for me. This Anthropocene period that humans dominate the planet, and it's all about us now. And one of the things that I'm going to say that might sound overtly political is that we human beings just care about themselves. When I don't believe that this global warming thing is caused by humans. We're not going to do that debate, but one of the things that we're just obsessed with the survival of humanity, and it doesn't matter about plants and animals. We're just obsessed by the survival of human beings. It's all about us all the time, all the time.
Yeah.
And what you've just said is exactly more or less that's sort of a conclusion to what you've just said.
Well, he's actually looking at how humans have eaten and managed to find food and been involved with food since 3.5 million years ago, and how it's evolved to this point.
Go on. We
now need processing for all we eat. Like even if it's only cooking, but we need processing, and it needs to be safe. And as I say, we've had really a lot of degeneration in our food because of multi-processed foods, which lead us into a lot of the illnesses that we have today. And we need to start growing food for the good of humanity than for profit. That was his finish of it. But he said he spent his life looking at this. It interested me because I've been interested in food for so long.
But you've just said what I've just said. We've got to grow food for the good of humanity. What about growing food for the good of the planet?
Well, it could be. Yes, well, that probably would be for the good of the world as well if we did it. If we were doing decent things, and it should help everyone. One hopes.
Everything. Yes.
Everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Everything we're demonstrating about is for the good of human beings, not really. Isn't it? It's
exactly.
Generally, yes, I think
the end game. It's all for our benefit.
Yeah. We're dreadful how we ignore all the sort of losses of. We're increasing, but because what we do with food also increases the loss of the biodiversity, both plant and animal.
Well, I know
Exactly.
Chris Packham was saying that
On that note,
Oh,
Anne,
sorry.
I'm going to say thank you very much because we've got to move on. Let's go. Thank you very much for that, and let's move on to Margaret.
Oh, that was really interesting, Anne.
Yeah, it
Really
was.
fascinating.
I could have gone on. We could have gone on all night talking about that. To be honest with
Yeah.
you, and maybe we might. Maybe we might.
Yeah.
Right. Anyway, carry on, Margaret.
Well, I was just going to say Chris Packham on this Earth series that's on, he was saying 94% of the world's animals are domesticated. 94%.
Yeah, I usually use a figure about 80, but let's not argue. What you're trying to say is most of the mammals on the planet are actually for human consumption.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Or as pets.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're saying. I do. Okay. We've got to crack on. Anyway, thanks for that. And finally, anything from my wonderful Andy.
I think somebody actually mentioned this a while ago, but I watched a documentary on Netflix, thanks to Claire, called Cave of Bones. It's part of part of a series called Unknown. And it was about the finding of a Homo naledi, which I don't know whether was it you, Margaret, mentioned a while ago, found in South Africa a few years ago, a completely new hominoid. If anyone's got access to Netflix, it's excellent. It really is quite an eye opener because this 5-foot hominoid isn't, as far as they know, related to us. But it survived, and it did also. Then they found that by accident the remains in a cave, and as they were excavating, they then realized that these remains had actually been buried in this cave, which was in a really difficult position to get to.
Sorry, Andy, it sounds great.
Yeah, but the earliest known burials are Homo sapien burials, and they are in Israel 120,000 years ago. And these ones for Homo naledi are 250. Although I've just seen another date for 300,000 years ago. But not only that, they've got markings on the cave wall. One of them was buried holding what looks like a tool, which they've got out in a block and are analysing and all the rest of it, which means all sorts of sentient thought and everything. It's just mind blowing for 250,000-year-old person who's not even related to us.
Andy, are you trying to say that everything that the Neanderthals have ever given us, they were more advanced than the Neanderthals? How dare you?
Yeah, and smaller brains, and completely contradicting all the theories of brain development and everything, and don't seem to be even related to us. So fascinating, worth a look. If you've got access to Netflix, have a look at it. So,
thank you for that, Andy. Thank you. I made a statement. I think it was a few weeks ago. It may have missed everybody, but I made the statement. Maybe it was the Homo sapiens who were the ones who were struggling. It was that we're actually directly related to Homo neanderthals. I know that sounds bizarre, but everything that we're saying is turned on its head, and you've just done it again. You just flicked the coin and you've turned it on its head. It's branding. It's brandishing this new these new ideas and bringing these new ideas forward. It's all good. Really good stuff. Really good stuff. Anyway, I didn't expect we'd be talking for 20 minutes on various other things, which is absolutely brilliant. But we are going to get on to Avebury now. One thing that I would say that I've just seen in my notes, and it's not actually up on my images, which I'm going to have to go to Google on this one, right? But one of the things that's obvious in history, right? We're going to see it now, right? And so we're going to go onto the screen now. We're going to go directly to Google, right? And so here we go. We're going to go onto my Google, and we're going to do this. And this is one of the things that we've not really discussed is if you go to Mice How, right? If you look at the ground plan of Mice How, which is on Orkney, remember we need to do Mice How in the future, but the ground plan of Mice How, right? If we type this in quick, right? If you look at that, that's inside Mice How, right? And you see this on the left here. I know I'm going through this quick, but if we look at that there, that's a basic plan of Mice How, right? And if you're looking at that, right, that's described as a burial chamber. And if I turn around and say to Anne, what does that look like to you?
It almost looks like a Christian shape. I don't know what it is, but it must be older than that, I think.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is. Right. Okay. You could stand up in here. What does that look like to you?
Mm-hmm.
Just keep your minds going. Keep your minds going. Right. This is inside. This is inside Mice How. Right.
Yeah.
So you go into this main chamber. You got down a passageway. On the left and the right, you've got these little chambers, sub chambers, and you've got a chamber in front of you.
It
right?
almost looks like a dwelling.
Right.
Or
Right. Okay. Right. Keep that word over there. Keep it up there. Right. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to another site. Right.
Yeah.
We're going to go to another site, and we're going to go back to Skara Brae now. Right. We're going to go back to Skara Brae. So if we do Skara Brae, and Dell's just joined us, by the way. So if we go back to Skara Brae, right, and we look at let's go with a plan, because we looked at like 10 plans last week of Skara Brae, so it's fairly clear. But so if you look at these buildings, right, and one thing that you clearly see is lots of these buildings have little cells off them, right?
Yeah.
They got passageways and they got cells off them, right? So when you start thinking, this is one thing that I got written down. Mice How, classed as a burial chamber, very similar to how the buildings of Skara Brae are built, right? So then it brings me back to what I've been saying for a long time and what other archaeologists have been saying, right? That lots of these buildings, this is Skara Brae, lots of these buildings that like Mice How, that are referred to as burial chambers, I believe did not start off as burial chambers, right? And this is a thought of not just me, but quite a number of archaeologists out there. I just wanted to put that in food for thought. Okay, I want to leave that there, right? We're not talking any more about that. We could do more afterwards, but we're leaving that there. So what we're going to do, we're going to go directly into the lecture now, and what we're going to do, we've got lots of images, as you can see at the bottom of the screen, right? We've got a fair few slides to go through, right? And we're not going to get through them all tonight, but I have shown you this over and over again. This is the plan. That this is what's on page 73 of Ancient Britain, which I've got open in front of me, right? I've got Ancient Britain open in front of me, and I've got some really nice images today, which to me are some images that you may not have seen before, right? So that's good, but you will have seen this before. This is Avebury, and I started reading about Avebury a bit deeper than I usually would, and I went outside the box, as you know I like to, and the Paleolithic landscape at Avebury is an understated element of the Avebury landscape that we see today. The Mesolithic landscape across Avebury is a missing element within the Avebury tapestry. And then you go to the Neolithic tapestry that you're seeing there today, right? End of, that's it, job done. And that's the problem when you go to places like Avebury. It's sold to you as a Neolithic landscape. As usually I sell it as a Neolithic landscape. It's a fine example of a Neolithic landscape, right? And I always move to Avebury as one of those sites, of one of those landscapes. That's an image of one of the main ditch, the ditch at Avebury. Look at it. It's deep. It's a very deep ditch. So what you've got is that all these little dots here indicate some of the stones. Oh God, we just missed it. All these dots here in the middle indicate some of the stones. The little lines are modern roadways. Forget about that, right? What you've got then is the Houcher lines. You've got the bank, right? And directly between the bank and the stones, those little black dots, is a ditch. It's really badly drawn, actually. So between the bank on the outside, you've got a ditch, and you've got a plateau on the inside, and you've got stones and things that go bump in the night, right? But one of the things for me is the enigma of Avebury, right? Is these massive bloody ditches, right? Because one of the things that we do see in archaeology is we're obsessed with banks, not Barclays Bank or TSB. What we're obsessed with banks when we go to Maiden Castle, right? We see these huge banks that go up and down. Hadrian's Wall, we think of a wall above the surface. We think of the Antonine Wall. We think of the bank, right? I've been teaching in my Monday class, which we look at Welsh history. On the Monday, we've been looking at Offa's Dyke, but it's usually the bank that we're talking about, right? One thing that we don't usually talk about is the ditches. So the Peter will know now that I do a lot of digging here for ponds, posts and holes, and quarrying out stone for building and all the bloody rest of it, right? Digging a hole in the ground is far more difficult than building a bank, right? I can testate to that. As an archaeologist, digging holes in the ground, right? You think you're taking out a little bit of soil, and the next thing you've got a massive mound of soil. Digging graves as well. I've got a lot of practice at doing that. Digging a hole in the ground is far more difficult than building a bank, but it's the banks that are usually the things that actually survive, that actually show that something's happened. So when you go across an archaeological landscape and you don't see anything, you don't see the banks, you just see a little bit of dip in the ground, nobody's really interested, right? So the ditch to me is the reverse of being interested in the bank and the stones. So hence the ditch, right? The ditch. Now, what we think of with this wonderful site, this wonderful site of banks, ditches, stones, enigma, things that we don't really understand, is that I always say go to Avebury. If you can't get to Stonehenge, I tell you what, Avebury's free, guys. Girls, Avebury's free. I think you got to pay a £5 to park in the National Trust car park, right? But if you're a member of the National Trust, right, you park free. Anyway, forget that, right? If you want to save yourself 20, 30 quid, go to Avebury, because the experience at Avebury is with you. You get to decide what you see at Avebury, right? When you go to Stonehenge, they tell you what to see, and all my teaching, all my classes are for you to see, for you to understand. That guy standing in a ditch there. You get layers, flat bottom ditch, diagonal cutting into chalk. Look at all the facts that you're learning now. Layers upon layers upon layers, deposition, 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 and eventually it gets filled in, right? Nobody's sat there to fill in the ditch in. What happens is it's a human inference on the landscape where the ditch is being dug, and then it's naturally being filled in over time, which is naturally happening. The Bankmere Road, right? But again, ditches, we love them, and we get an idea of scale there. And also, when you're building a bank, right, it's far easier to build a bank than it is to go in and out of a ditch, because the soil, the stone, because that's what we're talking about, really soft stone, the chalk, that needs to be taken out. And the chalk is quite magical. I don't know if anyone's, well, living in West Wales, right? Strangely enough, we find chalk in the middle of nowhere, right? And there is no chalk near us. It's been brought here. So the chalk that we've got is really, really magical. Again, looking a little bit more at this, right? So what we need to do. So this is in the Old Wessex in Wiltshire, right? So when we think about this, when we try to understand this, Avebury at the foot of the Marlborough Downs, an enormous earthwork. We're going by what James Dyer is saying here, an enormous earthwork. And he's right. A circular bank, still 4 meters in height, surrounds a ditch that was originally 9 meters in depth, right? Well, I'm actually thinking probably a little bit more deeper than that. But where you take, I think you're talking about the depth of the ditch is taken from the internal plateau. So basically, internal plateau, right? Then you've got the ditch. So the height is taken from the internal plateau 9 meters down, and then you've got the rising bank above this that creates the external bank. Now, there's some figures that James Dyer has actually put in this, right? And when you think about it, so if we go with the houchers here, and what you can see is lots of little crosses and little black dots and so on. And we'll explain what all these things are for, right? And one of the things that really fascinates me is the cove. We look at some images of the cove, right? I like the cove. It's a really interesting monument. But looking at this, getting an idea, getting a feel, getting an understanding. So it has been estimated that 150 tons. Let's start again. 150 tons. 150,000 tons of chalk were dug out of the ditch and piled up to make the bank. Now, I think that's. I actually think that's wrong. I think it's a hell of a lot more than that. 150,000 tons of chalk. Well, for me, 150,000 tons of chalk doesn't sound a lot, and it doesn't sound a lot. I think there's a lot more. So when you think about that, right, in that area there, right, you've got quite a number of tons taken out of that little small area. So the estimates here, I think, are wildly out, right? So what we've got with this site, when we look at it, vaguely what you can get is an understanding of this. There's what we believe, there's four entrances, right? There's 4 ins, and there's 4 outs, basically. You've got 4 entrances, right? And when you look at this and you see this, right, you can clearly see in the southeast, you get something called the West Kennet Avenue. We've mentioned that before, leading not too far away from West Kennet Long Barrow and a place known as the Sanctuary, right? Now, you've got something known as the Avenue off on the left-hand side, which is also out of one of the entrances and the exits into the site, right? So I believe that there were probably 2 other avenues. I think there were actually 4 avenues leading towards Avebury, but we've got no evidence of the other 2 in the north. We've got no evidence of the other one in the immediate east. So one thing as an archaeologist, what we've got to do is actually we've got to find archaeological fact. We've got to find away from archaeological assumption by looking at some of the little plans here today, and we can work 1 or 2 things out, get a feel of what Avebury was about, right? One of the things I wanted to do today was to look at a phased approach. But I tell you what, if we did a phased approach, then it might turn out that the stone circles were first, then, or the ditch and the bank was first, or what's going on, right? So I didn't want to do that. So what I want us to do is stick everything in there and to try to get a gist, to try and get an idea, a raison d'etre for this wonderful site. Now, it's just going back to this plan again. You know, I know I want to obsess more about that ditch, but just move myself away from the ditch, right? So what we got, these 4 entrances, 4 gaps through the earthworks at the cardinal points. An area of 365 meters in diameter was enclosed. Now, 400 yards enclosed, right? So you in diameter. You could think that that's deliberate. 365, they knew about the days of the year, or maybe they had a different way of looking at it. That happens to be the diameter, 400 yards, or 360 meters, or whatever way you want to look at it. It's a big area. It's a big area. The problem is today you've got all these roads, and it's unlikely you can run across the road without being killed. That's a shame. One of the big difference with Avebury is that it's still used today, right? It's utilized today. There's a church there, right? There's roads, there's pubs, there's housing, there's the National Trust, there's a museum, there's John that says boo to you, you know. There's a farm there as well, and there's sheep grazing, right? It's an active living landscape. It's a landscape living today. Now, I went to a site known as Stanton Drew years ago with a group of students. There were loads of cows wandering across the field. There was cow mess everywhere. And I felt that the site just didn't have a sense of taste. It didn't have a sense, you know, the sense of the ancient landscape had gone. But maybe I was wrong, because when you've got a site like this and you're still using it today, you're still utilizing the landscape, and you're still using the stones, and you're still using all these bits and bobs. You know, the cattle hide behind the stone, the sheep hide behind the stone, people hide behind the stones and have a pee, right? All these other things. The stones are still useful, right? The bank, you can sit on the bank and look at the view, right? We're still using it today. I know lots of people, instead of going to Stonehenge, if they want to be a pagan and get straight down to the undies, what they do is they go to Avebury instead, right? You can do whatever you like at Avebury. Around its edge stood an outer circle of, it said, 100 unshaped sarsen stones weighing about 15 tons. Now, I don't like that. But simply because if you look at that there, what you've got is these blue things here, these purple things here. If you look at the purple, right? And you've got a few purple over there, right? And you've got these pink ones by here, right? So it says that there was 100 of these initially. I usually come up with a figure of 90. Anyway, 90, 100, right? It's likely that there was never ever 100 or 90 stones around the outside, and it describes them as unshaped sarsen stones. Right. Well, when what we're going to do is we're going to quickly go through these, and then we're going to come back, right? So if you can see these blotches on here, that one there and that one, those two, these two are a lot more than 15 tons in weight, more like 40 plus tons in weight. These are chunky stones. And one of the things when we use when we hear about the word unshaped stones, it's almost as if, how dare they put sarsen stones that are unshaped? How dare they not give us an aesthetic? Let's even look at that. Isn't that beautiful? But you can get what I'm saying. Really, it's a modern landscape as much as an old landscape. And in fact, forget about that stone circle there, because there's one stone circle there. There's another stone circle in that field, but there's another circle being found. But I believe that the site was never ever completed. What archaeologists gesticulate over, right? Because when they hear, right, these stones, Peter knows, and when we went there, right, these stones on this side here, right? Okay, let's get my little drawing thing. Let's just, so we know what we're talking about. These stones along here are all broken and jagged. They were actually reconstructed, right, from bits in the ground. Now, lots of people argue, right? So if we get rid of that there, oh, hang on a minute, I'm drawing on the screen. Let's not do that. Lots of people argue that in the past, the stones that were here, and all the way along, they were actually demolished and destroyed, right? But when you analyze the holes in the ground, there's evidence to say that stones were never ever in them, right? So it's a site was never completed. But then again, you tell me of an artist that's happy with what they completed, right? Architects are never happy with what they've created. Maybe it was never meant to be completed. Maybe the whole thing is that this landscape was a work in progress. And when we think about prehistory, when we think about a cathedral is a work in progress. Who would have thought that Winchester Cathedral or Westminster Abbey or York Cathedral or any of these cathedrals set out with a set plan? They never did. They were added to, a bit was taken away. Church, bit added, taken away. Bit added, taken away, taken away. This is what history is about. So we can't really ever be thinking that what is completion. What there is the experience, the Neolithic experience of this landscape. So what you can see, if you look at that there, X, marks stone holes, right? Now, this is rather interesting for me. X marks stone holes, right? Why aren't there X's marking the stone holes here? It's likely that the author of this, our friend James Dyer, may have actually suspected, like me, that where they may have marked depressions in the ground, a stone never ended up in them. And this is a really interesting point. Maybe there were stones never meant to end up in them. Now, within this landscape, within Avebury itself, we do know of two other stone circle arrangements. Now, I'm not sure it's actually in these notes, but I'm gonna say it anyway. There's, I think when we went there, I think maybe that stone there over by the entrance, because it felt like it was, because I made a video there. I've got a video on YouTube somewhere. It's like so old and 3 people have watched it, but I went there with a chap called Jim from Lancet Major years ago. Jim's no longer with us. And this was like in 2007, 2008. YouTube was fairly new, right? So we put this video out there. And the story about that stone is, that little one there, is that in the 1300s, I think the dates in the reign of Edward II, they what they used to do is they used to pay people to undermine the stones so that the stones would collapse and the local farmers could go in them and break the stones up. That's basically what the story is. I stand to doubt whether these stories are actually true or not, but when they actually excavated on it, might actually be that stone alongside the stone to move it. They actually found the remains of somebody with a coin from the reign of Edward II, and I think the coin was dated 1326, 1327. Oh, that one, it wasn't obviously dated. That's when it was minted. And they actually found medical instruments, and the coin itself was probably paid to the individual to undermine the stone, but I don't know how much of this is real, but somebody had gone out there one day, undermined the stone, and the stone had collapsed on them and it killed them. Because the stones were actually seen as the work of the devil. The stones were seen as pagan, were seen as wrong in a period when Christianity in the 1300s, 1320s, 1330s, when Christianity is quite big in the country until it reaches the end of 1340, and then people die of the plague and everyone's dying. So you can clearly see those two there, and you can see one mark the cove. And the reason why I would like to come back to Avebury and just do one part of a lecture on Avebury is because there's a little bit more that we could actually do. And then the next time we come to Avebury, I think we might actually do Avebury next week actually again, and just sort of follow that on with a little bit more detail. And then we'll do something else next week as well, as we're doing something else this week as well with the work of Glyn Daniel. So these two are the stone circles, and obviously one is called the northern stone circle, and it's got something known as the cove. Now the cove is really interesting. It's a really interesting monument, and we will talk a little bit about the cove later on. Really interesting. And in the southern circle are an enigmatic line of small blocks. In other words, there's a linear box. There's a square box. Actually, was that a question that somebody asked last week? Is there actually square circles and rectangular circles? I'm sure somebody asked that, and we basically fudged it, and we looked at it, and we sort of mentioned about the box in Castle Rig, and we just moved on from there. But this is an actual square or rectangular box of arrangement of stones. They're not all circular, they're not all oblong, right? I think it was Margaret, we came to task with this Margaret, 4 stones, right? Is that a box or a circle? Anyway, but we got clear evidence of this at Avebury. Moving on. And there it is. This sort of nice little plan. I'm liking this one. This is a nice little plan. And there it is, newly discovered feature. Now, they find new things at these sites all the time. And to be honest with you, right, as you can tell, I'm more of a fan of Avebury than Stonehenge. And if I was, if I was Mike Parker Pearson, a person that you know I really love, right, if I had his money, right, and the research money that he gets, I would invest more time in Avebury, because Avebury has a lot more secrets. And look at that, there's another little weird feature at the back of the car park along the high street. So there's new stuff being discovered at Avebury, right? And what is outside the bank at Avebury as well? And I would love to sort of get an idea. Somebody in years' time is going to find one of the other avenues going up north or going towards the east. So that'd be really, really nice. Now, back to this next point here. Back to this next point. I mentioned about this farmer, right? And not this farmer, this guy with which was found with a coin at number 73, I think it was. And this stone at number 73 again. We do believe that this guy was a learned gentleman because he was some kind of physician, because he had some kind of medical kit with him. So he was paid this silver penny, right, to undermine a stone which collapsed on him, right, and he remained there for centuries, right. But then the other point as well is, if we think of from 24 all the way down to 14, now this is rather interesting. Many of the stones are now missing because it said that some were broken up for building and others destroyed by farmers clearing the land for cultivation in the 1700s. And we think, these evil people in the 1700s destroying this monument is still going on today. It really, really is. It's still going on today. You know, we about this time last year, we found this stone, which was I don't think I've ever shown anyone any images of this stone, but it was a stone that's broken off from a standing stone. Right, it's about a foot thick. Right, it's quite, you know, dimensionally, it's about 1 meter wide and it's about 1 meter and a bit long. Right, and it's clearly been broken off. Right. So I said to my daughter, we dug the stone up because it had been dumped into a load of stone. And my daughter said, why did you dig this sacred stone up? And I said, I didn't dig this sacred stone up. It was mixed in with a load of other stones. So at one point, the stone had been moved from somewhere else, right? So what we do, what the point of me saying that, let's get to the point, Carl. The point of me saying that is that we blame people in the past for doing things, right? But we're still doing it today, you know, accidentally or deliberate. And we're still destroying monuments today. And it's just, or were they actually destroying these things? Because stones are not there now, between 24 and 16, and the missing ones between 16 and 14, and all the way along, and all the rest of it, right? And a few missing up here as well, between 36 and 40. What we immediately think is that these stones were broken up and somebody removed them in the past, but in lots of cases, there's not really the evidence for that, except we've got to blame somebody for the want of evidence. It must have been there, blah, blah, blah. We actually do have reports from the antiquarians like Aubrey in the late 1600s and Stukely in the early 1700s, those great sort of those great writers, those great antiquarians who are going around these sites, you know, recording the fact that if you go to the local blacksmith in the village, right, he would give you a hammer and he'd give you a chisel to break a piece of stone off, right? Well, the thing is, right, there's lots of stones to go around, and you know, it would take a lot of effort for somebody to break a small bit of stone off these stones, right? So, you know, it's likely there what I'm trying to say, there wasn't as many stones as archaeologists blame people in the past for destroying. So looking at that there, I like this plan. Oh, hang on a minute, where did that plan go? Oh, right. I like this one because it's a nice bit of color, but except it's not really color coded properly. So the outer brown is the bank, and the inner brown is the ditch, right? It's not very helpful. And you can clearly see there's a massive absence of stones over on the right-hand side. And it said that there were stones there at one point, but it's not clearly, they're not really marked on you. And if you read the numberation here, it goes 1 and it goes to 97, right? And basically it's thought that there's stones, but between 78 and 97, when they've trial excavated some of those holes, they found no evidence of any stone chips or anything in them, indicating that there were ever stones in them in the first place. So the point, Andy, we did a lecture on this before, and one of the points is, if you're digging a hole in the ground and you're putting a stone in it, right? It's easy to do that, right? You're nodding your heads and thinking, "Oh, well, easy to put a 20, 30 ton stone in the hole." Yeah, it's far easy compared to taking the stone out, right? As we all know, folks, if your car gets stuck in a ditch, right, it's easy to get a car in a ditch, right? You can't get it out again without a crane, right? And when you start thinking, so if I go, I got to give you some answers now, right? When we look at this, right, we think that if we along here, right, there were loads of stones, right, along here as well, right. So that's there. So if we clear that again, so this is what we're talking about. So the area that we are talking about, if we sort of change the color again, so get a bit of red in there. The area I'm talking about is this area, right? So this is where those missing stones are, and obviously there's missing stones up here as well. But the point I'm trying to make, in this area here, they've excavated some of the holes in the ground. There's no sign of any chips or anything, right? To get a stone out the ground, engineering wise, you've got to do a hell of a lot of work, right? You've got to almost dig a load of soil from one side, right? So you'd have a huge hole in the ground, right? Then the stone would topple. And then as the stones topple, then you've got to get it basically out of a ditch, and you've got to move the thing out, right? So this comes back to what I've said. I don't believe that there were stones in all of these places that they said that there were stones once, right? I believe, this is my belief, it's not necessarily lots of archaeologists' beliefs, but I believe, for example, that they planned to have 90, 100 stones around the outside, right? Or maybe they didn't plan that at all. But as people moved into the community, they would have a ditch, they would have a hole in the ground, and they would be able to erect their own stone in there, right? So that explains why all the stones are on higgledy-piggledy shapes. Some of the stones are like 20 tons, other stones are 10 tons, other are 15 tons, other are 30 stones, other are 40 stones, right? So if they're deliberately created to create a monument, they're all going to be similar sizes, but they're not. So that indicates that whoever's erecting these stones are erecting these stones over a long period of time, maybe 500, maybe 1,000 years that they're actually erecting these stones. But by the time that they wanted to complete maybe the stone circle, if that was their wish, people had lost interest. People decided that they were going to do something else with their lives after 1,000 years. So there is no real evidence to tell us when the order of how Avebury was actually constructed, right? And there's no real order over how most of this was constructed. This is a nice sort of plan of some of the other monuments in the landscape. Silbury Hill, so you got West Kennet, Long Barrow, Avebury. There's another stone circle there. You've got a little bit of a spring, the sanctuary as well. All these other things between West Overton and Faulkner Circle. There's evidence of a Neolithic village, right? So that's the little landscape. So to give you an idea where we are, there's Avebury Henge, right? There's a river nearby. And what we then got is that we've got this higgledy-piggledy landscape. And it's not organized, it's quite all over the place, like any monumental landscape. And I tell you what, right, Adam will know what I'm talking about. With my supposed obsession with the Romans. The Romans weren't organized either. The Romans used previous trackways. The Romans used water waves. The Romans did not build all their forts square or rectangular. The civilian vicuses didn't all have bathhouses and so on. The Romans weren't organized, and nor was the landscape of Neolithic, Mesolithic, Bronze Age, or Iron Age people. Why would the landscape be organized? So that's giving you some idea where we are, and it's a World Heritage landscape with all these wonderful monuments associated with it. And even outside the Avebury landscape, where you've got the World Heritage landscape, you can see other things like Long Barrows, the Beckhampton Road Long Barrow over there on the left, West Overton. You've got circles, Broadstones outside. So there's stuff absolutely everywhere. Oh, not mentioning the Marlborough Mound. So that's something else altogether. We do believe, and you can see the Marlborough Mound there, and there's Silbury Hill. The Marlborough Mound is smaller than Silbury Hill, right? But it's probably built sometime around the same period, within the space of 200-300 years. That's the thing. When we talk about this sort of Neolithic world, we talk about period, right? We talk about everyone looks at this landscape. Look at those two massive stones again compared with the other ones on the left. And some of the stones at Avebury, when you do go and see them, have been re-erected. They've been reconstructed. So if this site was constructed over 1,000 years, nobody ever sat down and thought, right, this is the way it's going to be. Nobody ever sat down like that. They added to it, like we add to our lives. You know, when it was me and Andy in a room. We were in the Ironside, Institute, and Andy said we can't not have these archaeology classes anymore. Right? This was Andy. He said, why don't we do it online? He said, right. So we decided to do these classes online. Right. So Andy is the only one of the original group left. There's a point to this. So we've developed this class from 2012 all the way through to 2023. Right. So over 11 years, we've met people, come and gone. There's new people. The format has changed. We went from Skype to something else, and then we went to Zoom. Right. So things developed. Andy never thought we'd still be doing this after 11 years. Andy had no idea that he'd be meeting all these other people, nor did I. And that's over 11 years. So what was happening at this site over 1,000 years is massively different and interchangeable. And there's a belief as well. There's a belief with this landscape that as it's being used today, people must have a respect for the earlier landscape because these stones are still there. They're still languishing in the landscape. So in other words, when we read back, you know, farmers want to remove some of these stones, right? Well, they didn't do a bloody good job of removing these ones, did they? All those ones, all those two buggers, yeah. Those two buggers there were actually made into a barn, right? So they were made into a wonderful barn. So everything is, and also anyone ever get a chance to go to Avebury, right? Don't just stop and just look at the stuff down here, right? Go over here and have a look at this stuff. Yeah, across the road. I've got a really nice photograph of Peter. Basically, hang on a minute. Where's that photograph? Hang on a minute. I got to tell you, right? That stone there, right? Hang on a minute. Where is it? I'm going to tell you how big these stones are, right? That stone there, right? Standing in front of it, 1 second, is we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 individuals alongside each other in front of that stone. That's how big that stone is, and Pete's one of them, right? So we got 9 individuals standing in front of the stone. This is how big these stones are. So a lot more than just 15 tons in weight. They're really chunky stones, but that one is bigger than lots of the other stones, right? So again, this is flowing us in there. So one of the writers about this site, and you'll find, so if I go to my little thing here, right, some of the big writers of these sites are the likes of Joshua Pollard. He's a good Neolithic writer. You've also got Aubrey Burl, right? And I've got one of Aubrey Burl's books here, which is Prehistoric Henges. Aubrey Burl loves this site, but when he talks about this site, he talks specifically about the henge rather than the stones associated with the henge. And there's a beautiful image here of Avebury with the trees. It's absolutely wonderful. And this is Aubrey Burl. One of the things that we're going to actually go on to, and this is really interesting, right? We've got some dates here, right? And we actually see this actually on the ground. So there was a guy by the name of St. George Gray who excavated at Avebury between 1908 and 1922. And you know, all of these excavations in the ditches mainly are producing domestic rubbish, pottery, grooveware, that Neolithic grooveware which we showed you before, flints, tools, tars, rubbish pits, evidence of people living within this landscape. Absolutely wonderful. This again is Aubrey Burl writing very poetically about this site. On the front of the book, he's actually got our arbor low on front of this book, Prehistoric Henges. Get a copy of this off Amazon for like £5 or £6. It's well worth it. You know, there's so much in the way of information on this site out there on the internet, and this is nice sort of shadowy, picturesque sort of image. So we got the next one. The next one is a great one. I don't think I've really seen it before, but we're going to do it next. So the dating evidence to this, this is Aubrey Burl says that the two smaller circles might actually predate. So the smaller circles, which is, so go back to this again, go back to the original plan. The southern circle there, and the northern circle, it's believed, Aubrey Burl says, predates the bank and the ditch and the other stones, this other stone circle by over 200 plus years. So interesting, but this cannot be substantiated. But the point is, people are expanding. You know, when we look at history and archaeology, one of the things that we do, we like to put things into categories, right? Now, if you come with me to churches in the Vale of Glamorgan, right? 20 years ago, I would have said, all right, chancel comes first, nave, then tower, and then porch, right? So I would have probably been right 20 years ago. So if you take me around churches in the Vale of Glamorgan now, I would say nave, chancel, tower, or maybe porch, and then tower or porch. The order would change, right? But it might be that different churches have different orders. The problem is with archaeology, we can't really look at things anymore with a copybook, right? It just doesn't work. It really doesn't work. You've got to go to these places. Don't go with a guidebook, and try to learn yourself about what's going on. And sometimes you might be more surprised. You know, let's all have a go at Anne now. Anne's always saying she doesn't know anything about history and archaeology, but at the beginning of the class, she took us 10 minutes with some of the wisdom and learning from what she's learned and some of the stuff she's picked up. Yes, you can understand this archaeology with or without me, right? Because of all the things that we picked up. And well done, you guys. Really well done. I'm loving this plan here. I'm loving this one. And the reason why I'm loving this one, Andy, right? You can work out where people have been digging at different times. I'm loving it. Loving it. So, and we've also got we've also got geophysical survey work, right? We can understand that as well. We're really up to 2018, right? Ground penetrating radar. And the weird thing, the other thing as well is you have to get permission from, basically, well, in Wales it would be the Secretary of State, but you've got to get permission from Heritage England or English Heritage or whatever they call themselves to actually do a physical survey, because it's classed as it's not intrusive, but you've actually got to get permission. And one of the things with this site is that we could say that it's been dug into before, right? So, but what we do have is that there, right? That sort of that there is what is the southern circle, right? That's basically looking at the southern circle, seeing that you've got these post holes, right, or stone holes, because some of them are post holes, right? That's an important thing. When we're talking about a stone circle site, we always think everything's a hole for a stone, right? Well, we know if we go to Stonehenge, not all the holes in the ground are actually for stones, right? Some of them are actually for posts. Other holes in the ground held nothing in them, right? Held nothing in them. And back to what I said at the beginning of the lecture, I got really obsessed with this, didn't I? Back to what I said at the beginning of the lecture. I said that a hole in the ground takes a lot more effort to create than building a bank, right? So if you dig a hole in the ground, that's all you've got. You've got a hole in the ground, right? And that's good enough. You created the process. Moving a stone, right? That's a process. Digging a hole in the ground, that's a process, right? So if we go to this, and we see these are the excavations, right? So what we've got Sir Henry Moe there, in 1894. He digs what looks like part of the bank, right? So or is that, it's difficult to work out what he's excavated there. We've got a little bit of excavation in 1894. We've got Harold St. George Grey. That's clearly in the ditch. I do believe that we're talking about. I think that's really what we're talking about. So Harold St. George Grey, is really difficult to work out what they're digging from this weird plan, right? Alexander Keeler is excavated from 1937 to 1939. Alexander Keeler is an interesting figure, because Alexander Keeler is one of those figures that goes onto the site, who actually finds lots of broken bits of stones, puts them together, and it's really weird. You go to Avebury, and you see these stones that have been glued together. It's really odd. I don't know what araldite or stuff they've used, but it's really permanent. And there we go. Stuart Piggott is actually excavated. We mentioned Stuart Piggott, and there we've got more excavations, and I do believe that they're associated with some of the holes for the standing stones. So it's good to get an idea, and obviously geophysics. And you're thinking, why doesn't the geophysics actually cover the whole site, right? Well, it doesn't, because some of the site is got houses on. Other bits of the site, basically, Heritage England said you can sort of do geophys over there. I mean, we don't need you to do any more, right? Geophys doesn't do any damage, but there's a technical issue over doing geophys. It doesn't do any damage, but it has to be planned, right? So again, moving on again. Again, this is the information for teachers. Avebury, Henge, and West Kennet Avenue. It basically says, we'll read this one out. Actually, we'll read this out. It says a henge is a circular area enclosed by a bank or ditch, used for religious ceremonies in prehistoric times. Now, okay, Avebury is one of the largest henges in the British Isles. Yep, tick that one. Even today, the bank of the henge is 5 meters above the ground level, 6, maybe 4, and it measures over 1 kilometer all the way round. Now that's interesting, that the bank and ditch measures approximately 1 kilometer all the way around. The stone circle inside the bank and ditch is the largest in Europe. It's partly. 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, there were as many as 300 henges in use. I would say it was probably more than that. Avebury has 4 entries. We've done that, whereas most others have only 1 or 2. Right. So this illustration here is one of Alan Sorrell's reconstructions of the site. It's quite nice. It's really interesting. it shows that we've got stones occupying all the holes, whatever, right? But this is Alan Sorrell. I think this is from the 1950s, a reconstruction of the Avebury henge. You sometimes come away and you think, did it look like this or didn't it? So the one thing about the cove is something that we are going to look at tonight. It basically, the cove is that thing in the top circle, right? The cove there, that little thing sticking out there, and it's got some information about the cove. There were other stone settings inside these circles, including a three-sided group within the southern circle known as the cove, and the largest stone, that's wrong, it's the northern circle, right? But I think it's got a bit confused there because you've got the other one there. And actually, this is wrong. Three-sided group. Right, okay. I don't know what's going on here. The largest stone that remains from this group weighs about 100 tons and one of the largest megaliths in Britain. Well, actually, when you see those there at the top, right? I need to write to them about that. Those stones in the top there, it says, there we go, 100 tons. 100 tons in weight, and you'll see it, right? None of these here in the bottom bits 100 tons, that these up in the top are in the northern stone circle, right? Wish I hadn't bothered reading that now. And the sarsen stones themselves actually are collected from Marlborough Down. And again, it's saying that many of these weigh 60 tons. Yes, we'll agree with that. We'll agree with that. And Peter's seen some of them with me. Or the same as 6 double-decker buses in weight. So a double-decker bus being, was it 10 tons? The weight. I like it when I get that 6, sort of 6 crushed double-decker buses. So we move on again. This is the LiDAR image, and you can see how impressive the bank is, and you can see how impressive the ditch is when you actually look at that. So one of the things that you can't actually see it on this one, but it goes on to say the southern entrance, an avenue of 2 parallel stones. We don't really. We'll come back to that in a minute. There we go. We'll mention this now. So this actually goes running south to something known as the Sanctuary, the West Cannon Avenue. Those stones, and this goes to the Sanctuary, which is necessarily been destroyed, and it's believed that there was another series going to Beckhampton from the western sort of exit there as well, and it's sort of showing an obelisk there as well. But we will go to the cove, and we might do that bit next week. So back to this LiDAR image again, looking at this LiDAR image, getting an idea of what's going on. So have I given you any dates when this site was actually in use? I don't think I have. Actually, what I'm going to say now, I want us to be finished about 20 past, right? So I'm just going to keep going with the lecture, okay? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a quick drink. If I might lose my flow, and if anyone wants to get a drink, just go out the room quickly. But I'm just going to carry on now. I'm just going to have some orange. So, slip. So, again, it's mentioned in the northern circle, it's mentioned in the southern circle, it's mentioned in the obelisk. Now, it was believed that there was this tall stone standing there. There's a legend of this great obelisk standing, not as tall as Cleopatra's Needle, but this long, tall stand of stone. No evidence, well, there's sort of evidence that there was one there, but there's not really much of it left. So we basically said that Aubrey Burl said that these 2 circles, the northern circle and the southern circle, may have actually been in use before the main period of use of this landscape. So this landscape was probably in its completed form, or so we think, by around 4,500 years ago, towards the end of the Neolithic period, running into the Bronze Age. Objects found was, this is a point, even though we've mentioned earlier on, from the excavations of our Keeler and our St. George Grey, even though we found stuff for the levels of excavation that they've done at the site, right, is relatively there's not as much pottery as they would have liked to have found. There's not as much bones as they would like to have found. There are a few pieces of Windmill Hill pottery, which is sort of from the north. There's a few scraps of Peterborough pottery from grooves, but when you think about those ditches that have been excavated and all the other work that has been done here, so if we go to get an idea, so we think, right, those are the areas that have been excavated, right? So we're talking about a few boxes of artifacts here. It's a large area that's been excavated, but not a massive amount of artifacts. Loads of flint arrowheads, but really not much in comparison to the area in relation to other sites that have been excavated. Some Neolithic pots, for example, but not as much as there should be found within the excavated evidence at Avebury. So what we're going to do now, we're going to simply gorge on a load of images, right? And maybe I've done it. We've done really well now. So let's just crack on, and we're going to go to the cove. We've got to go to the cove now. What you can see, right, is that even in the 1700s, right, it was believed that there was another stone circle, i.e. the northern stone circle. So you can see two stones there, and you can see another little one over there on the right there, another little one just above the word that says the cove, right? Little building there as well, little sort of house. And you've got one that looks like a tombstone alongside the road, another one a little bit further over. What we're going to do, we're just going to look at this now, right? And we're going to think, right, okay, we can sort of work out that there's some of those stones still with us later on, right? So what we then go back to, we start to think, well, what these massive stones here, these two stones sticking out here, those stones were actually used as two of the sides of a barn, right? Two of the sides of a barn. Now, what we look at now, if we go back to an aerial photograph, one that's a little bit more clearer, you can see those two stones there. They're sticking out there. That there, if we want to sort of do a little bit of an annotation, we want to get rid of that. So as you know, my drawing is pretty bad, but you can see that there was probably an arc of stones running somewhere like this to create a, but what's happened to that stone there is that alongside the road, so the road would have actually been widened. But what is interesting for us is the cove, and that for me it is the most impressive bit of this site, right? So let's just get back to it. I knocked off my images there. So back again. So let's just go there. Let's go feed through these images as well. Don't worry, Pete, we've already done these. And there they are. They're sticking out. Look at those massive. Look at those massive mothers there. They look big there. These are huge. We're talking about one of them being 100 tons in weight. Wow, massive. And the other thing as well is we don't really know how deep these go in the ground, and that's really, really important. And again, here we go, the Cove at Avebury on the 10th of July, 1723. I do believe that the guy in the foreground, I think he might actually be Stukely, doing a little bit of an artist impression. Again, look at that. Antiquarians are interested in this. I tell you, if you go down to the local blacksmith to hire the hammer and chisel, right, it would be very difficult to get a chunk of sarsen stone off that, right? It really, really would. So if we go back to James Dyer saying, here these stones were broken up for buildings and others destroyed by farming, clearing the land for cultivation in the 18th century. maybe it's not as extensive as we think, simply because there weren't as many stones there as we once believed. So look at those there. Don't they look absolutely massive? They look absolutely huge, right? There's 3 stones rather than 2, right? And if we move there, and now there's 2 stones. So they don't look very big because there's a building directly backing onto them, but they are huge. If you think there's a sheep, right, alongside that stone there and this one sticking out, that's a little bit further over. The one in the back there's a little bit further on over. That's part of the outer circle, right? So that's a bit further over. You get your perspective. So these 2 stones create this cove. These 2 stones create this wonderful enigmatic cove. And again, just well worth just looking at this, right? Pete, can you remember this cove? I think Pete's fallen asleep.
Yes, yep, I was muted, wasn't I?
Pete, are these stones
Yes.
as impressive as I
Wasn't
make
it thought
out?
to be something to do with fertility?
What, the cove?
Yeah.
Wasn't Kathy with us? Didn't she fall pregnant after that trip? If you look at this, if you look at the angle, they're a little bit more close together. But the cove itself, they believe, was actually made to create a building. The biggest problem is with the whole story of Avebury, as we'll look a little bit next week, is that we can think it's about fertility, right? Like we did when we looked at our lecture last week. Pete, you missed the lecture last week. It was man porn last week. We looked at Wilmington man. We looked at Carn Abbas. We looked at phalluses, right? That's definitely about fertility. Or then again, was it about fertility? That's the point. We've got these.
Weren't people putting coins on the stones?
Yeah, and suddenly when you turned your back, a certain person had taken them all, and it wasn't me. Again, it's that what these stones are for, where they fit in history, and what they are about, right? But the main thing is, well, we've got some massive stones that have been erected on the site, really important stones, and again, it's sort of getting into that that connection with this wonderful, very overpowering site. And when you start to look into these ditches, look at the again, Peter, when you're thinking about these ditches, the ditch with 4 breaks in it that was dug around the site, you don't need this amount of soil to create the banks, right? And one thing that springs to mind is that maybe, don't really know if this is true, but maybe the amount of chalk taken out of the ditch, some of it was taken elsewhere, because the chalk taken out of the ditch overcompensates for the amount of chalk needed to create the bank, right? And actually, when you think about it as well, there's a lot of build-up material in here, so it's very difficult to work out what is exactly going on. You may actually think that some of the chalk may have been taken somewhere else, and Silbury Hill is not too far away. It would have actually been quite special to have taken some of the chalk to build Silbury Hill. I think if we think about distance, I think Silbury Hill's about 1.5 miles away. And you know, over a period of time, if you took some of this chalk to Silbury Hill to aid in the construction of Silbury Hill, that would actually make sense. But obviously, when you think about it, the amount of material in it, and the other thing as well is this is quite a strange one, right? I'm talking about ditches and banks, right? This is more or less level, not too far from the height of the original ground level, right? But the bank is still standing 5 to 6 meters in height, right? So where has this soil come from? Again, the other way around is not necessarily come from the bank. It's not eroded from the bank. So where's the soil come from? But where has the soil gone in the initial instant, back to the original point, that not all of the soil would have been required to construct the bank. So what we've got a problem of the material in the ditch, right, at the site, which is not really relative to the experience that you get when you actually go to Avebury. Again, it's this really nice white chalk, and again, another expression. This is actually looking from inside the site, looking over towards the bank. And again, these people are disappointed for not finding many artifacts. But then again, they are digging into a very, very deep ditch. I basically talked about a ditch here. I basically said, right, we're going to have to dig down 2 meters in the ditch to actually get to the bottom of it, right? Well, yeah, we're going to need shoring up. We're going to need, all sorts of things, right? But excavating something like this, back in the early 1900s into the 1930s, I think this itself, the ditch itself, is more important than most of the rest of the site. But obviously the cove, the massive stones at the cove as well, hugely important. And you can actually see that, and you're looking at that and you're thinking, this looks like something from somewhere else, right? It looks like a huge tidal wave of white stuff, right? But again, I'm really confused with when I see this, that they didn't need that amount of chalk to create the bank, and this idea that it's gone somewhere else. Well, we'll go with that. And this is what it looks like today. This is part of the ditch that still looks fairly deep, but you've still got about another 5 or 6, 7, 8 meters to go before you get to the bottom of the ditch. And there's some of the bank on the right. So bits of it, what you've got on the inside, you've got a level platform, you've got the ditch and a berm, a level platform at the bank, or you've got a level platform, ditch, and you've got immediately the bank. But and all these different ways of looking at the site. And again, looking at that as well, this huge ditch. And again, you know what I think about this? This is very, very special. Finding nothing in these ditches is also very, very special. It's pseudo non-ceremonial. It's pseudo something else that we don't really understand. Why are all these ditches around the country? Why are all these henges around the country? And with some of them, there's not much in the way of evidence. So if people are doing ceremonial stuff, what they do, it's standing around just sort of and just going somewhere else. I don't know. And again, this is looking from the road is in front of us, right? That's a southern road, the modern southern road. You've got one of these. That's a very different stone than the stones on the western side, right? Very different shape. The few on the eastern side are very bigger, very fatter than the ones on the left-hand side that are slimmer, more potchy, and more taller. Looking at this, we're slowly coming to the end of Avebury Part 1 today, right? And we'll just look a tiny little bit about Glyn Daniels, and then we'll call it a day. Sorry about the earlier finish today, but so what we've got there, right? Can you see what can you see that there's something else? What you've got here, one circle. You've got 2 circle, you've got the new one. Oh my God, you've got another one there as well. Right, another belief circle. Now that means that Aubrey Bull was right, that these earlier circles do predate the henge, because if one exists there, it's directly under the bank. So can you remember the Thornborough stone, the Thornborough henges? We did them a while ago. There were 3 in a row. And I said there might be other banks and ditches and sort of other rows of these monuments along the landscape, right? And I'm thinking that the earlier landscape, a developed landscape, something developing into another sense of perspective. Because one thing that used to be thought is that it used to be thought, and we'll look at this sort of this next week, this southern circle next week. But you've got another circle there as well, another circle indicated, right? This is a topographical plan of what is believed to be there, right? And there's the evidence of the cove there. That's our little cove. These two little grey things there. That's where we are, right? And there's the other stones. We saw the angle there, and we looked over. We saw the other stone. These they believe that there's wood henges within this site as well. So some of these indicate wood henges, not necessarily just stone henges, right? Or just pits in the ground, pit henges. One thing that I may have made a mistake with, and I like making mistakes. One thing that when we looked at Warren Field, the Mesolithic site up in Scotland, we had a row of like holes in the ground, right? And in some of them we actually had evidence of charcoal. We had evidence of that there had been timber in them, right? But was there actually timber in all of them? Right, good question. Was the hole, as we've seen with the ditch, good enough? And the other thing as well is if somebody turns around and says, "Oh, what were these?" That's the ditch there, the one in the middle, right? Were these actually defensive? Well, bit stupid, really, when you've got 4 ways in, right, and no real entrance, no real indication of any defenses or anything. This isn't a defensive site. This is what it is. It's a site. It's a site. It's a monument that had some kind of importance to the people who were there for probably up to 1,500 years. So a long, incredible length of time that this site has actually been developed and renewed and changed and altered, and people's thinking about the site sort of went that way and went this way and so on and so on. Right. What in the way of human remains? We'll answer that next week. So again, back to this sort of simple plan that we actually started off with. I do believe that the next image is probably going to take us to the little talk about Glyn Daniels, and then we'll call it a day. So, and I've made up for us not having a 20-minute break. So there we go. Somebody moaned in my Wednesday class last week. They said we haven't had a break, so that was it. Oh, and then somebody moaned on Tuesday as well. Anyway, Pat's away this week, so she's away next week as well. So for me, in closing about Avebury today, Avebury is an experience. It's a developed experience. It's the Neolithic world over and over again, and Avebury is very different from Stonehenge, and nobody has really thought that maybe the people who built Stonehenge were different people who had actually built Avebury, were different people who actually built Standon Jew, were very different people who built stone circles in Cumbria, were very different people who built the stone circle at Arbelo with all recumbent stones. And so these things have different meanings, different places in history. So when an archaeologist turns around and says, oh, they did this and that there, right? And they also did this and that exactly the same at another place, right? That's wrong. Because we don't really know what they did here. But what we do know, they created this landscape of importance, ditches, banks, stone circles, all these other things, right? So what we're going to do, we're going to leave leave any questions for this at the end, and what we're going to quickly do now, we're going to quickly mention a little bit about Glyn Daniel, and there he is. It might be a figure that some of you have seen. This chap was born in the same year as my granddad Noah. On the 1914, 23rd of April. My granddad was born around there as well. He died on the 13th of December 1985, and 1986. He would have been somebody that I would have been proud to have met. He's an archaeologist, a scientific archaeologist, Cambridge University. He was a specialist in the Neolithic period, exactly the same period that we're talking about with Avebury. And he was appointed in 1974 Disney Professor of Archaeology and edited the academic journal Antiquity from 1958 to 1985. And he actually, he was actually a fantasy author as well. He used another name as Dilwyn Rees. So he had another thing. He was born in Pembrokeshire, but he actually had massive links with Lantwick Major and the Vale of Glamorgan. I think his family actually moved down here or something like that. I can't remember what the exact story is. So he was basically archaeology, and it was the Neolithic period. And yes, Glyn Daniel, when he was 5, he moved to Lantwick Major, and he attended Barry County School for Boys. The only famous person to actually ever go to a Barry Comprehensive School. There are more of us. And obviously doing archaeology, anthropology, that's his scientific, that's his honours degree and all the rest of it. One of the things that he was very much famous for was actually bringing the Neolithic to us. He would bring the Neolithic to us via TV, right? I just got to make sure that my thingy's plugged in just in case I lose power. Good. He was actually involved with Sir Mortimer Wheeler with animal, vegetable, mineral. And he actually served in the war. He returned to Cambridge to resume his academic life. 1954, 1956, he presented a BBC archaeology program called Buried Treasure. And amazingly enough, he had Kathleen Kenyon in the program and Sir Mortimer Wheeler in the program, and also a female actor in the program called Noelle Middleton. Interesting enough, mixing acting and archaeology. So and massively into his Neolithic tombs, and he wrote books on Neolithic tombs as well, Neolithic landscapes. And he was the host, often with Sir Mortimer Wheeler as a guest, of the game show Animal, Vegetable and Mineral. And he was named Personality of the Year in 1955 and Desert Island Discs in 1981 as well. So, and when we started this today, we talked about people who continued working. Well, he died quite young at 72, really, and he continued working very much until the last minute, and very much interested in some beloved sites in the Vale of Glamorgan. One of the books I would highly recommend if you're interested in going onto eBay, right, and looking for books written by Glyn Daniel, is a book called 150 Years of Archaeology, published in 1976. I have a copy. And he extensively looked at Neolithic sites in Europe. And what's that, lovely? All right. He wrote other books on Europe and other ones like Prehistoric Chamber, Tombs of France, 1960, and Megalithic Builders of Western Europe in 1963. So lots of other books that he was really into. And he was definitely one of those figures that told us that the Neolithic period, prehistory, it is up there of being really, really interesting, and go out and study it. And interesting enough, that those that are interested in the Roman period, he'd like to dabble into the Roman period as well. There is a cabinet full of glass artifacts, and that there is, I do believe, the Lion of Cowbridge. And this must have been actually taken in about 1984, 1985. I think this is a photograph of him at the National Museum of Wales. But again, look up Glyn Daniel, look at his work in connection with the Neolithic period. And on that note, I would like to know if anyone's got any questions. And obviously what we'll do, we'll be running normally next week. And we'll have our normal break next week, and we'll be looking more of Avebury next week. And next week, we've got to look at that interesting subject that continues on from where we were last week. So, well, that's what we're going to call it a day now. So we're gonna see if there are any questions, and I'm going to see what's in the chat box. And it says, "Oh, here we go, Dell. Thanks, Carl. Have to leave now. Have bro's wedding next Tuesday. Try to join Wednesday." And Margaret says, "Bye, Dell. Enjoy the wedding." You're not marrying him, are you, Margaret?
Yeah.
Oh, well done, Margaret. You get around a bit. My God, Margaret had a new boyfriend last week from bloody Panama or whatever he was
No,
from.
he wasn't my boyfriend. He doesn't like women. He's a
I
man's
think you
man.
said too much. Right, okay then. Margaret, as we're with you, I want to know if there's any questions from you this week.
Well, I've got the book by Aubrey Burl about prehistoric Avebury.
Good.
Oh, it's full of stuff. But it does mention when Aubrey wrote about it in 1663, in the South Circle, there were 23 stones. And
Yes.
then when Stukely wrote about it in 1724, there were only 4. Only 4 left.
Exactly.
And Stukely names and shames lots of people who took the stones away. There's a whole list of farmers and innkeepers and dastardly people that took these stones. And also another interesting thing is about the pillars of Avebury's Cove, which are very far apart with very wide gaps at the corners. And I hadn't thought of this, but of course the Sarsens are nearly 7 meters long, over 20 tons of solid rock to be lifted. So room had to be allowed at one end for the people levering the stone upwards into its trench, and even more space outside where gangs hauled on ropes up to 20 meters long. I hadn't thought of that, but of course they would need loads of room to do all of that work, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
And the other thing, that's my point. If you're going to take the stones back out the holes, right? Look at the amount of engineering that would take to take the stones back out.
Well, apparently somebody in Stukely's time, he was a property developer, a speculator, and it cost him more to get the stones out, to pay for the oxen and the workmen to get the stones out. It cost actually more than the houses were worth, and there was a great big fire and he lost every penny.
And that is exactly my point. You know, when people say there was a complete stone circle around it, you know, there's lots of us skeptics, you know. And again, it would be, you know, I would like to experiment that. I'd like to get I'd like to get a big stone, put it in a hole in the ground, and then see how difficult there is to then get the stone out the ground. Nobody does that type of experimental stuff, right? And what you'd have to do is you'd have to take a whole load of soil out one end, and there's not the evidence to say that these stones were ever moved anyway. You know what I mean? Moved out.
I'll just say another thing about Stukely.
Yeah.
He became religious. And he thought that the north and south inner circles were temples of the sun and moon. And to prove his theories about primitive religion, he said that Avebury was a landscape model of the Trinity. And he actually falsified measurements and plans to fit these notions. Can you believe that? He falsified plans and measurements. And you just wonder how many antiquarians who had religious beliefs falsified things to fit in with what they believed in.
Well, I used to do that when I used to go on dates with women. I used to take along a whip and an Indiana Jones hat, and I used to convince them that I was Indiana Jones. So it's a known thing, Margaret. It really is.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah, there's an illustration of it here looking like a serpent.
Ah, yes, I know the one. Yes. Go up on the screen quickly. Go on.
The bottom one.
Ah, yes, the serpent of Avebury. Yeah, you can see where it sort of moves in. Yeah, that's typical Stukely. Yes, yes, typical Stukely. Anyway, thanks for that, Margaret. Right, who else now? Who's next? Right, we'll do Andy, then Adam. So Andy, anything?
No, I was just going to ask what that book was, but Margaret's just answered that one, and I believe it's in our is that in our library?
It's in our library, of course.
Excellent.
Got everything in there.
So yeah, can't wait to hear the rest of it. I can't believe how big that ditch is. I never realised it was that deep. I've been to Avebury, and you don't get any idea of that going there. It's massive. That is massive.
They wonder in the book if it was originally meant to be a moat.
Could be.
Well, a moat for what?
I don't know. A defensive thing.
Who were they defending them? Who were they?
Fish.
Fish. Oh, they were defending. It was piranhas.
Yeah, for fish.
Piranhas. Talking about piranhas, Anne.
No, thanks very much. Interesting again.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Right. Okay. Adam, you next.
Nothing to add to that, but no, that was great. I love looking at Avebury, so nice one.
More Avebury next week, and we'll obviously have a more chunkier one next week. So, right, who have we got now? David.
Nothing, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Right, Gina, the one with the beautiful glasses.
No, nothing. Thank you. It's really interesting. Thank you.
Oh, right. Well, we must have. The last person to say anything today is going to be Peter, and it better be well worth the visit. Wait for Pete. Go on, Pete.
No, I'm fine. I enjoyed it all. Sorry, no questions.
Oh, that's disappointing, Pete. We wanted something from you.
Yeah, I know.
I tell you what. As Pete didn't have anything to say, what we're going to do, we're going to show you one last thing, right? We're going to just get one last thing up here, right? There's a bit of news from the week, and it was actually sent to me. Another thing from Pompeii, right? And we'll just do this last thing now, final thing. So we'll type in Pompeii. Oh, we done the pizza. This was a snake. Pompeii. It was a snake. Right, snake. Pompeii snake painting. Is that the one? No, I don't think that's the one. Hang on a minute. Right, more right discoveries. Let's just see. It wasn't that one. Hang on. It was like it was a very interesting snake. Okay, here we go. No, not that one. Oh, that one there. Now, I like that one because it's in relief, right? So look at that there. It's in relief, right? This sort of snake, and obviously it's got still some of these sort of pumice on the outside. Really nice red sort of this snake found at Pompeii. A kitchen shrine adorned with serpents, a bakery, human skeletons, exquisite frescoes, and yes, a picture of something that looks very much like a pizza. We've already done the pizza, right? And then basically what they're saying, much of that will be for future generations. So obviously lots they haven't excavated. But obviously the new excavations there under the searing summer heat, new dig site, so unexcavated areas. So there's still about a third of Pompeii that's not been excavated. And look at that there. You've got the oven being excavated there. Look at the preservation of that oven. And that's obviously they've got shelter and covers under it, and they've got all this new stuff. The pizza being found. There we go. We've got the pizza. We've already done that. And a skeleton being found. There it is. More bones. The burnt bed. The remains of a bed being found. This is all new stuff being found at Pompeii. A fragment of the mattress. And look at that painting there. Look at that. Look how well preserved that painting is. Again, more news from Pompeii. Always worth looking at this. This is a summer excavation. And the shrine, the snakes, and obviously more of the excavations there. And loads to see. So I just wanted to give a bit of an overview of that. So more of that on the internet. Obviously, if there's anything else we got from Pompeii next week, we'll put it into next week. So what we're going to do now, we're going to call that a day now. So again, sorry for the early finish. So I'm going to ask, right, Andy, is there anything else you want to say?
Nope, thank you.
Margaret, and anything else you want to say?
No.
Adam? No.
No, thanks, Scott.
Anything else from Gina and Peter?
No.
No.
And the man with the last say is David. Anything else you want to say? And then
No.
we'll call it a day.
No, thank you. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye, David.
Good night,
David.
everybody.
Good night.
Thanks for joining
Good
us
night.
tonight. Take care. See you all next week.
Okay,
Thanks, Carl.
bye.
Bye, everyone.
It's my
Bye-bye.
pleasure.
Bye.
More of Avebury and more other stuff next week. Thank you very much. Night, guys.
Good night.
Good night.
Night. Night, Anne. Right, we had an earlier finish today. Thanks for everybody watching online. I've got to do a little bit of work out there now, so I've got to crack on. So I'm just going to look in the chat box. Chat box today was Dell saying, thanks, Carl. Have to leave now. Have brother's wedding next Tuesday. Try to join Wednesday. Brilliant. Oh, it'd be good to have you join in on Wednesday. Big kiss from Dell. Bye, Dell. Enjoyed the wedding. Big kiss. Anyway, Dell, been great. If you're watching this, are you catching any of this? Nothing else in the chat box on 3, 2, 1. That's 5 from me. Thanks for watching, guys, and like and subscribe, join. I keep watching, obviously, the question of the day. That's every single day. More tomorrow, more of this lecture tomorrow. So that's 7:30 tomorrow, and in the morning as well, 11 in the morning. Thank you very much. Go for it, folks. Thank you. Speak to you all soon. Thank you very much. Thank you. Diolch yn fawr i chi. Nos da. I gotta see how to finish this now. Okay. It's goodbye from me. It's goodbye from them and goodbye from the team.